This is a really cool venue. I don't know whether we should have a speaker or a bull sale, but yeah. So thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate being here. Yes, I went and listened. I was in college, went and listened to Alan Savory in 1984 in Fresno, California, and that's kind of where it all started. So we'll get right into this. So, as Deborah mentioned, I could maybe be described as a jack of all trades, master of none. Lightning Bolt Cattle Company is our cattle owning entity. Probert Family Ranches, for the most part, owns the land that we manage. We also lease some land. Worked with Country Natural Beef, started with CMB in 1996. CMB was started in 86, so a long history with them in management as well as supplying cattle to Country Natural Beef. And then finally, we did what I think is a unique conservation easement on our home ranch in Wallowa County, Oregon, with Nature Conservancy. So I'll kind of run through these and go through each one kind of individually. So Lightning Bolt Cattle Company is the livestock owning entity. We own ranches in both Washington and Oregon. We manage about 3,000 cow-calf pairs. We own all of those animals right to the box. We put them through two programs. We put them through Country Natural Beef, which is a cooperative. So the ranches that put cattle through that program actually own the company. And we market about 60,000 animals annually, which, depending on context, maybe sounds big, maybe sounds small. 60,000 a head a year, to put it in perspective, nationally, I think the average weekly kill in the U.S. is between 600 and 650,000 animals. So in the grand scheme of things, we're a tenth of one day's kill. Carmen Ranch is a grass-fed program that we're involved with, does about a load a week. Most of that grass-fed product goes into food service and retail in the Pacific Northwest. I guess one thing I would say about Lightning Bolt is that we have really leaned into and embraced technology. And we've used Pasture Map. We're currently using Maya. We just started last week. We're using an inventory management software called FarmBright. We've done a lot of work with vents with the virtual fencing technology, and I think I'm speaking, or at least involved in a roundtable later today around public lands ranching, where we'll probably talk a little bit about virtual fencing and go into more detail there. And then since it's been available, we've used the HMI Excel-based planning software, which has been a great tool for us. And then working with all kinds of technology around individual animal ID. So Probert Family Ranches, that includes my brother and sister, myself. The picture you're seeing is actually the home ranch, and so that's about 23,000 acres. That's the ranch that we put the conservation easement on with the Nature Conservancy. We probably manage a couple 100,000 acres of public lands. Most of those, actually all of those, are in Oregon. Kind of a different style of management that maybe we will speak to at that later roundtable. We bought this ranch, what we call Midway. So this is the old Midway barn. This was a stage stop that was kind of in the center of the ranch. Actually, sadly, the snow took it down a few years ago, but We bought the ranch in 2014, which was a bit of a homecoming for me. I'd been gone out of Wallowa County for about 30 years, was able to come back to the ranch, and really this conservation easement, which we again will go into detail in a roundtable tomorrow with Deborah, was the way I was able to come back. There's a lot of different ways to use a conservation easement, and we'll go into more detail again at that roundtable. But for us, it was the way to get back home, and so essentially we were paid for the conservation easement. I know there's other ways where a conservation easement is donated for estate planning reasons, but quite honestly, there was not a path back for us unless we could reduce land costs. And so when we bought Midway, we'd already started early talks with the Nature Conservancy on what that might look like. I'll speak a little bit more high level, and then again we'll speak in detail tomorrow. But putting this conservation easement together, I would just say the big things for us in terms of the things we were willing to sell, which are property rights, were really easy, right? We didn't want wind development. We didn't want solar developments. We didn't want this ranch subdivided. We didn't want mines. All of those things are really easy to come to agreement with. What took a bit longer is the grazing management plan specifically that we thought was important, and that took us 3 years. And the reason it took 3 years is we didn't want the grazing management plan to be prescriptive. We want it to be based on outcomes, and so working collaboratively with the Nature Conservancy, with the neighbors that we joined on the outskirts of this ranch, with interested, we had folks with the NRCS there, but we said, tell us what you need. What are the things you need from this piece of land, and then let us manage to it. Don't tell us how many cattle to run. Don't tell us when. You just tell us what you want. You tell us what you want the riparians to look like. You tell us what you need for habitat, and we will manage to those things. And to give you a little bit of background, the Zumwalt Prairie is, I think it's about 350,000 acres. It's the largest remaining bunchgrass prairie I believe in North America. It might be in the United States, but I believe it's North America, and it's home to the largest concentration of raptors. So we have many species of hawks. We have golden eagles, bald eagles, and we have a lot of ground nesting birds. So bird habitat was very important. And so we said, tell us what you need. And then we create a grazing plan that TNC is involved with, I'd say on a higher level, but really ranch staff, we build the grazing plan. And then in this partnership, TNC then, their job really is to manage to see how we did. And I will tell you, we don't always hit our marks, but we obviously continue to strive for that. So from day one, when we started this process with TNC, we started with a 3-part holistic goal. And I won't go through all of this, but we kind of had that rooted in everything we do, right, since 1984. And so we rolled this out, and we made sure everybody's voice was in the room, and that our goals reflected the needs of both ours and Nature Conservancy and the community we live in. So I mentioned we did build this plan based on outcomes. Tell us what you want. The photo of the ranch, again, is one of the technologies we're using. It's called RangeSat, and so TNC struggled a bit, as all of us did, I suppose, to some extent during COVID. And they struggled mostly from a funding point of view, and which drove us to use more, I'd say, technology. RangeSat is a satellite-based program, and it's one of those pieces of technology that has more uses than I am able to decipher. But the one thing, I think this is important to point out, the one thing that we did use this tool for more than anything is what we call peak biomass. So in other words, TNC can, and other organizations can really get fixated on residual, what's left at the end of the season. And that's important. And it's important to them for their bird species, especially. But what we said is, can we measure peak biomass? Can we show that we're growing more grass every year, right? Because if we're doing that, then that allows us to leave more. And so this tool specifically was designed to measure that peak biomass. We'll go into more detail if you're interested tomorrow in that roundtable on the conservation easements. So Country Natural Beef. CNB was formed in 1986 by 13 ranches that were essentially going broke. And I'm looking around here and thinking there's just not a lot of folks my age that remember the 80s. My family lost a ranch, and so these 13 ranches actually got together, and this was their way to survive. That was a time of farm crisis. That was the time of 21% interest. I know we think they're high today at maybe 8 and 9. 21% knocked a lot of us out of the game. And so CNB really had its roots around a natural product. It is a grain-fed product. It is not a grass-fed product. And but those 13 ranches started it out of necessity. Today, I would tell you, CNB is more based around premiums. We aren't in those dire straits, but there is a need for the product, and we lean into that. As I mentioned, it's structured as a co-op, which is really cool. Any profits are passed on to the ranchers. Today, there's about 100 ranches in CNB in 11 western states. Originally, CNB started in Oregon, but we've spread out into the western states, including Hawaii. And Deborah mentioned this as well. What CNB has been able to do well is to adapt to change. And originally, it was that need for a natural product, and no hormones, no antibiotics, veg-fed. Those were the first things. But you, as the co-op, would ride that for a while, and then the industry would catch us, and so we'd have to adopt something new. The next thing that came along was global animal partnership standards, and those were the animal welfare standards put out by Whole Foods. Whole Foods, I guess I'd say it this way, we were the first to embrace the animal welfare standards that were put in front of us, which really moved the industry that way. I mean, Gap, if you look at a video sales catalog for calves and yearlings now, I would say about 25% of the cattle carry a Gap certification. And now, the next thing that we are trying to adapt and change to is a regenerative program. And so we started that in 2020. We now have all 100 CNB ranches have baseline data. And I'll probably forget one of those things we measure, but we measure carbon, we measure organic matter, but we don't think that's the most important measure, especially for us in the West with very low rainfall. We measure biodiversity, we measure water infiltration, bare ground. I said biodiversity, I'm forgetting one, but it's a suite of measurements that we do. We worked with Sustainable Northwest, who's a prominent nonprofit organization in our area. We also work with Northway Ranch Services. That's James Rogers in that picture, and Anna Claire. I don't know if Anna Claire's in the room, but Anna Claire works with James with Northway. They did the baseline monitoring, and so that was the start. So some of the things that are a little bit different about Grayswell and why we went down this path, I guess, as an organization, is we really wanted it to be grassroots driven. We wanted those 100 ranches that are in our cooperative to be part of the process. And so that's where we started. We started with the ranches. We brought in Sustainable Northwest, of course. The other thing that caused us to go our own way was our size. So if you think of 100 ranches scattered in 11 states, managing 6.5 million public and private acres, the scope was, at the time, was more than any of the organizations out there could handle. Thank you. And so we went our own way. That's not to say we didn't work with, we worked with Gabe Brown, we worked with Audubon, we worked with Land to Market, and their fingerprints are on a lot of this. This is just a quick look at, we have a database that all ranchers can log into. This will show all your soil tests are there, all the baseline data is there, along with RAP. Please don't ask me what RAP stands for, but it's satellite-based data where we can see each of our ranches there. I want to touch on this, and I mentioned it. CMB is a grain-fed program. That might be heresy for a lot of folks in the room, but the reality is, even in a whole foods meat case, at least 80% of the product in their case is going to be grain-fed. And so what we said is, can we create a regenerative standard that incorporates the finishing phase? So as part of that GAP 4, these cattle are all finished on, I'm not going to say pasture. They may be, you can see in the photos, it may be crop aftermath. Pastures would not be good pasture. I would say the attribute there is access to space. But what we did in this Grayswell thing is we said, can we incorporate those livestock into a finishing, into a crop rotation and a finishing program? So think of the cattle as just a crop rotation. Maybe it's corn. Cattle come onto that irrigated circle and they're there for a season, and then they move on. And then we follow those with corn or triticale or alfalfa. So we actually tried to use the cattle as a crop rotation. And that's just kind of a quick look at what 6 years might look like. So any of you are interested in what we're doing, we'd love to have you join us. So I don't do this for a living, right? I love managing land, but I don't speak for a living. And so I wanted to give a sense of I actually get my hands dirty, our family gets their hands dirty. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about our land management, and I'll make it quick. We make mistakes, right? And this is, I'll bet a lot of us in the room have had this happen where a float breaks on a trough. So you can see the result there. Keep in mind this is 16-inch rainfall, so this is pretty dry country. And we thought, oh my goodness, right? And this is along the road, and TNC has to explain this to their donors, and we felt terrible, right? It looks ugly. That's what it looked like a year later. And if you look in that one, if you look really close, you can see the red barrel where the valve was that failed. I think the point I want to make here is how much we can accomplish if we can control time and recovery, right? We can make mistakes, and maybe it wasn't a mistake. I mean, I honestly think impact is a tool that maybe is not utilized enough, but given recovery, we can fix a lot of things. So that's a little bigger picture of that same place. This is kind of interesting. This is a corner. We've all had cattle, I'm sure, corner up. You get a little event. This was interesting because this happened because of the fires in the Pacific Northwest. We had smoke where visibilities were down to a couple hundred feet, I guess, and the cattle just weren't happy. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. They had feed, they had water, and they just weren't happy, and they walked, and they cornered up here. Again, that's a TNC vehicle parked there that you can see. There's a TNC sign on the door, and it's like, oh, crap, you guys again. But again, it's what we can do, right? What we can do if we control time and recovery. And so this is, I mean, that's a fence line look. I don't know, it looks pretty good to me. Same photo on that fence line. So thank you. I think I did pretty good on time. This is just for interest, I was horseback the other day. This is a picture into essentially Hell's Canyon, so the deepest canyon in North America. One of our force permits is there. This is where we're using the vents technology. Again, we'll be talking about that a little later in the day, but I appreciate the time and look forward to speaking to you in these roundtables.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Dan. Hey, Dan. We intentionally built it in so we can take like 2 questions. Oh, cool. So who are the lucky takers on questions? I know I have one virtually, but we will definitely take one here if we've got one.
There's one. Oh,
great. Raise them high. Let me see them. Okay, I'm going to go here and then over here.
Thanks. So I've worked on both sides of the land trust world, and what you're talking about, outcome-based agreements, I think it's something that the easement world has transitioned to, thankfully, but it's still, we have a tendency as humans to kind of focus on the here and now instead of thinking 50, 100 years out. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about that process and what some of the successes in those outcome measurements have been. I know it's short term, but like what's worked and what maybe you would still do different if you had another chance?
Great question. The process was really push people out of the box, I'd say, not out of their comfort zone, out of the box, right? So part of the funding that TNC got for this conservation easement came through NRCS. And when we started talking about outcome-based, it's like, that really doesn't check these boxes that are here on this application. But everybody was in a mindset that wanted to make it work. And I honestly don't know whether it still is. This was the largest conservation easement at the time in Oregon. So it was new for TNC. It was certainly new for us. So some of those things we monitor and measure. This peak biomass is a big one for us. Actually, for me personally, I just think that's the best indicator. If we have less bare ground and we have more grass and we have more biomass, but we also measure riparian stubble heights. every 5 years. We do photo points on riparian. This is not so much a measurement, but one of the things we realize is we produce about 1,100 to 1,500 pounds of biomass per acre. For us to meet the needs of those ground nesting birds, we need to defer pastures, right? So we will leave 2 or 3 pastures ungrazed every year there's a good word for it that all of you know in this room and I don't, but it's like structure height. And so those are the things we manage to, yeah.
We got one more over here.
Hello, there we go. Okay, as a youth and hopefully future rancher, like what kind of advice would you have for me? And I'm sure there's others, I know Laird here is, just like getting into it or even being a part of a company like you where we want to be regenerative and just kind of that kind of like family focused community vibe, but still focused on, you know, being profitable.
Yeah, yeah. Let's not kid ourselves. HMI has given us a lot of tools to make ranching more profitable, but it's low margin, right? And even in our case, Lightning Bolt Cattle Company really kind of pays the maintenance bills for the land company. We've made our money in land appreciation, honestly. Having said that, I can remember my dad telling me, you need to do anything other than ranching, right? To be successful, and I think he was right at the time, but my dad and I butted heads enough that I just wanted to prove him wrong. It's a great motivator. But I honestly believe today there's more opportunity for young folks. The idea that humans are part of management, right? We have buyers that are buying legacy ranches. We have other entities that are buying land. Those lands now are being thought about in a way that how does a human interact with those lands? Because we're part of it. And so I guess if I was a young person today, I would be excited about the future. I would not be quick to move to an opportunity. I'd be selective. Easy for me to say, right? Still have to buy groceries. But I'm excited about the future. I think we're just on the cusp of a realization that hands-off management is not going to feed us and is not good for the whole when we think of holism. Yeah. So thank you. Now I'll get out of the way.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the great questions.